Hello and welcome. My name's Brett Baker, and as you can see, I'm here with Stephen Mead, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Denis Wick Mute range now for euphonium. We've had some questions come in over the last 12 months talking about various aspects of playing for Stephen, so we thought this is a good opportunity to talk to him about it. One of the questions regarding the straight mute, Stephen, was should you play differently when you have a mute in?
That's a very good question. A few weeks ago I was judging the Belgian Brass Band Championships, and there was a new piece, a fantastic new piece, that had a lot of muted sections. And unfortunately, a lot of the bands just used the mutes to make them sound quiet. And one of the points I made is that every mute that you use has a tonal palette that you can choose from. And if you just use a mute to sound quiet, then frankly, you could get away with using a travel mute to sound quiet, and you lose the beautiful quality of the wood and the metal. So this is a wonderful mute, probably the most popular performance mute that we have. Ordinarily, not so different at that dynamic, but if I wanted to make the metal mute sound, of course, as soon as you start to give a bit more air, you start to hear the metallic sound.
Yeah, you get a zing.
Yeah, and the Ellaby, Euphonium Concerto is great. Would I use this on the Gordon Jacob Fantasia? Around that pitch range? No, I'd probably pick something that has a little bit more warmth and colour. It is a mute that if you really work at it, you can find the soft colours. A lot of people say, well, they're quite expensive, I can only afford one mute. I'd probably recommend this over the others in terms of performance, because you can play very soft, very easy. It's a bright sounding mute, but it also speaks very easy.
Yeah.
And sometimes with a wooden mute, you've got to work a little bit harder to get the effect that you want. But usually the composer just writes mute for euphonium. He'll write cup, straight, plunger for cornet, and euphonium mute. So sometimes we have some choices. Again, it depends what you can find in the band room in some cases.
And would you mind playing a little bit on the wooden mute to show the difference then in that case?
Yeah, this is a lovely sounding mute. It has a whole different tonal palette to the metal mute. When you play very high, actually they start to sound a little bit similar, but in the mid-range, I'd have to work very hard on the metal mute to get that softness. This is a really lovely colour, and if you want it to really go, it's almost like a muted metal mute.
Yes,
if you know.
Muted metal mute. The other question that comes up is that particularly adjudicators tend to write when people have muted passages, it's sharp, it's out of tune.
And if the players are playing quite loud, the pitch on a mute does tend to ride out. So what I tend to do, if I have an extended section, having a trigger on this besom, I would just pull out just over 1 centimetre, and so long as I've got time to take the mute out and put that back, otherwise I would just play an entire section on the trigger, which is probably easier, unless you've got some notes that it could be even higher. So mutes, generally speaking, will make you play a little brighter, and you can quite happily enjoy the sound and forget that actually there's pitch involved as well. And when you play very quietly, actually the pitch can drop away. You know, if I go back to this mute and was to play something really at piano, if we take the basic pitch, if I'm not supporting the air, that can drop away.
Yeah.
But if I'm playing normally, then that's high.
Yeah.
That's definitely high. But often the sheer mutedness of the instrument can make you unaware of the pitch until an adjudicator says, you guys are all out of tune.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? You know? I absolutely love the travel mute. I remember having a chat about the fact that I thought this could be played perfectly in tune. The guy said, no, it goes a quarter tone sharp. I could demonstrate the sharpness of it to the point it probably play even sharper than the guy was playing. And it affects it more in the low range. So that's me not compensating. But I remember a conversation I had with Denis himself, and we were talking about how using a practice mute like such as this, by making the tuning good, you're actually improving your tone. And I'd already felt that, and he actually said that was part of his teaching at the Royal Academy, which I found really interesting. So I can play it perfectly in tune, even picking out. I'm not saying, the mute is really in tune. I'm saying in-bell mutes do have a tendency to go sharp, but if you work on getting that pitch low enough,
it's going to open up your sound anyway.
Open up your voice.
Which brings us on to the practice mute.
Yes.
Proper. I remember Denis in workshops always demonstrating this on trombone, where he would ask somebody to play a note, and then he'd ask them to put the mute in and play a low note, and then play very, very loud, and then take the mute out and listen to their glorious sound that they could produce.
That's right.
Is it the same for euphonium?
Most people would use and purchase this mute because they have neighbours that bang on the wall when they hear the natural open sound. So both of these mutes have a fantastic noise cancelling function, 80%, somewhere around there. The advantage of this is that you can have this backstage before a competition where everyone's going shh, and you can just play enough notes to keep the lips moving. And in hotel rooms, if I arrive somewhere at 10 o'clock at night, I can do half an hour, and honestly, that half an hour sometimes is so good. In terms of natural intonation, this is really, really good. I know a lot of euphonium players who say this is their favorite mute. They have it at home. They use it for tone training, and they use it for not disturbing family members or their neighbors. You can hear it's got that little metallic, bounce to it, which you won't get with that. So it has a whole new personality. I've actually used this in performance when I recorded the Euphonium Magic, and I needed to sound like a piano in 4 parts. I put this. It was absolutely perfect, and I remember Mike Moore going, how do you get that sound from that? It's just this very clever practice mute. The nice thing, the tuning is fantastic. So you can satisfy your neighbors. They'll go, oh, and it's so in tune. I can barely hear it, and it sounds gorgeous.
If you have that issue where you're practicing at home, you don't want to annoy the neighbours, is that sufficient where you're playing with the mute all the time and then only playing in an ensemble situation where you're playing in open?
Yes, very good question. Obviously, playing with no mute is better. Let's say that. But I wouldn't play with any kind of normal force any of the high range. So middle and low range, because what you're talking about is not really learning pieces or the day before a performance. You're talking about keeping in shape.
Maintenance,
Yeah. So if normal flexibility was out of the question, then you're doing all your flexibility, but with a vastly reduced sound.
So you don't think that using the practice mute often is detrimental from that point of view?
No, but I think you have to modify a little bit how you would practice. So if you would normally be going, if you're a very physical player, I would say just use it to work on the condition, finger exercises, tonguing. But I wouldn't play above high G consistently. And if you've got a high solo, hey, use it as a transposition exercise. Take it down the octave. This is, for me, is an absolute essential travel item. If it was this much longer, the intonation would be a little better, but you'd never fit it in your case. You'd never travel with it. So for the size that it is, I think it's worth its weight in gold. Yeah.
Steve, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you very much for answering the questions. I know that the people that sent those questions in will be very appreciative. So thank you very much.
Been a pleasure. Thanks very much.